The final patch of Season 13 is about to drop, and it's filled with a ton of champion buffs. We've got yet another round of Briar nerfs as well, as this will now be the 4th patch in a row that she's been nerfed. Hui will be released this patch, but as always when a new champion is released, we're going to hold off on ranking them until our mid-patch update, so we have a few days to see the champion's power on live servers. So with the help of our challenger players and analyzing the most recent data, we are set to bring you guys a complete update on the solo queue tier list for patch 13.24. But before we get into it, be sure to check out SkillCapped if you want to truly get better at League of Legends. We're the only service that offers a money-back guarantee if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service. We do this because our service really does work, and if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't pay. Learn more at the end of this video or click the link in the description below. With all the massive item changes shipping at the start of Season 14, it wouldn't make much sense for Riot to go heavy on buffing or nerfing items for 13.24, so there won't be a single item change for this patch. If you guys have not seen our video that details every single new Season 14 item, we'll leave a link in the top right hand corner. So jumping right into the top lane changes, K'Sante will be the first up with a couple of buffs. W mana is being reduced by 20 at all ranks, while W resist damage ratio is going from 30 to 50%. Considering just how hard the recent 13.23 nerfs hit K'Sante, we just can't see any way he gains a significant amount of strength back from these buffs. K'Sante won't be completely bottom of the barrel for 13.24, so we'll be moving him up into the B tier, but there will be much better options regardless. A few buffs to Mordekaiser are on the way, with his Q and R being adjusted. Q changes involve the AP ratio on the spell being increased from 60 to 70%. R will now reveal targets on the start of cast, which means that if the enemy is walking into brush, that will no longer cancel the ability. Nothing too heavy hitting here for Mordekaiser. We've had him in the top lane A tier for a while now, and we don't see these being enough to give him that added push into S tier. Those are the only 2 top lane champions changed for 13.24, so let's have a look at how the tier list is shaping out. OP tier is going to be locked down by 3 champions, being Malphite, Nasus, and Trundle. If you guys did not catch our mid-patch tier list update for 13.24, we moved Trundle up into the OP tier as his buffs have proven to be very impactful, and he's now one of the best split push top laners that you can play. You'll notice that Varus is being pushed up the tier list, which may seem a bit odd because he doesn't have any buffs in 13.24. Well, it's actually a super wonky yet effective new tank build that is caught on, which involves rushing Radiant Virtue, and it's giving Varus top lane a ton of strength. We'll have a much more detailed breakdown on the pick in our OP builds video for this patch, so watch out for that one. A few of the best top lane bans for the current meta include Jax, Fiora, and Malphite. Trundle, Nasus, and Garen are 3 of the most optimal low elo top lane carries. Surely this will be the patch where Briar sees a significant decrease in strength. Like, come on now. 3 patches in a row of nerfs and Briar has remained a top tier jungle pick. So let's see what 13.24 has in store for us. Attack speed ratio is being increased from 0.644 to 0.669, so we're actually giving Briar a buff. To be fair, all the changes to follow are nerfs, and there are 5 of them. Base armor is dropping from 32 down to 30. Q damage takes a hit, going from 60 scaling to 200 to 60 scaling to 180. W attack speed is being reduced by 5% at all ranks. E damage reduction is chopped a bit, going from 40 to 35%. R damage is being nerfed, and Riot is targeting the lethality builds more heavily as the bonus AD ratio drops from 75 to 50%. So each change on their own really doesn't seem that big, but when you add all of them together, let's hope they leave some sort of dent. Trying to predict whether Briar actually loses power from being nerfed has been a nightmare as of recent, so we won't be moving her down the tier list for now, and if the nerfs actually end up being impactful this time, we'll adjust her for the mid-patch update. We've got a small scaling buff lined up for Gragas in 13.24, as he's going to have his passive cooldown reduced from 12 seconds at all ranks to 12 scaling to 6 seconds. Important to note is that Gragas' passive will scale with the levels to where he can put an added point into his ultimate. This means the buff kicks in at level 6, level 11, and level 16, so if you were worried about top lane Gragas becoming OP again, it's likely not going to happen. It's more so just a pure scaling buff that will help out Gragas in those mid to late game skirmishes. Considering Gragas' passive is very consistent in what it provides, proccing off any spell usage, we see this buff having a solid impact, and we'll be shifting Gragas from B into A tier for 13.24. Ivern isn't a very popular jungler right now, but he's had one of the highest win rates over the past few patches, so Riot thinks that's enough to warrant a few nerfs. Base health is going down from 655 to 630. E slow will be reduced by 5% at all ranks. Pretty light nerfs overall, and we don't see them significantly impacting Ivern's tier list placement, so he will remain in the S tier for now. So running down the complete jungle tier list, we have just 1 champion in the OP tier for another patch being Nocturne. Besides Gragas moving up, one other jungler we're giving an added push up the tier list for 13.24 is Brand. Brand jungle is starting to garner a lot of attention, even in high elo, and as players have optimized the pick, he's looking extremely powerful. Clear speed is completely nuts, and the scaling strength is incredible, so he's an especially good pickup for the the lower ranks. Brand jungle is eclipsing around a 52% win rate right now in plat and below, which is very respectable. Win rate drops off beyond diamond to around 49%, but since we focus our tier lists around what's best in diamond and below, we're giving Brand a push into the jungle S tier for 13.24. A few junglers that are well worth the ban right now include Briar, Nocturne, and Evelynn. Brand, Shyvana, and Nocturne are a few of the most lethal low elo carries. Moving on to the mid lane changes now, we have 5 different champions being adjusted, and let's start off with Azir. Azir W damage is being increased at the later ranks, going from 50 scaling to 110 to 50 scaling to 118. As a result of the 13.23 Azir adjustments, his win rate ended up dropping around 1%, so this buff should aim to put him back around the same power level that he was in 13.22. That power level was still not very high though, so don't expect Azir to gain much strength from this buff, and we will be leaving him in the mid lane C tier. A scaling buff to Galio is being issued for 13.24 as his Q is what's being targeted. Q cooldown is dropping from 12 scaling to 10 seconds to 12 scaling to 8 seconds. So buff will kick into full effect at level 9 and provide Galio with a bit of a stronger mid-game skirmish. Buff shouldn't end up being too over the top though, and we won't be moving Galio up the tier list as he will remain in the mid lane A tier. Qiyana's early game will be helped out for 13.24 as her base mana is seeing a buff. If you guys are looking to pick up Qiyana, we have a dedicated Master in Minutes course on our website for the champion. Base mana is going from 320 up to 375, and her mana per level is actually up as well from 50 to 60. Although not a ton of players are building Manamune on Qiyana these days, the buff should make the item even more unnecessary on the champion now. Buff will increase Qiyana's laning power in all matchups, but especially in tougher matchups where you've got to sit back and farm with Q, this change will feel quite nice. Is it enough to significantly propel Qiyana up the tier list though? Likely not, as we will be leaving the Empress of the Elements in the mid lane A tier. Talon is going to be receiving a really nice quality of life buff this patch to his ranged Q. Ranged Q will now reset Talon's auto attack, so a little bit more upfront burst potential here. It's hard to say exactly how impactful a buff like this will be, so for now, we'll be leaving Talon in the mid lane S tier, but a push into OP could be warranted for our mid patch tier list. Fresh off some passive buffs, Riot has another round of adjustments for Vel'Koz. They're just bug fixes, but pretty impactful ones, as Riot has fixed how Vel'Koz's W and E would fizzle at times, which basically means the spells would disappear without applying their effects. There was also supposed to be a buff to Vel'Koz's E channel duration, but that has been pushed to a future patch due to a new bug occurring when trying to implement the change. It's anyone's guess as to how impactful this fizzle bug fix will be, as we don't have any data available to back up how often it has actually been occurring in games. As a result, we're not going to be moving Vel'Koz anywhere on the tier list, so he'll remain in the A tier for 13.24. So with all the mid lane changes covered, let's have a look at what the mid lane tier list is looking like. Just a note right off the bat, Hui will not be rated until the mid patch tier list update, as it's impossible to accurately rate Hui until we get at least a few days of seeing and playing him on live servers. OP tier is going to look exactly as to where it was last patch, with Syndra, Orianna, and Sylas as the big 3. One other adjustment we'll be making that has nothing to do with the 13.24 changes involves moving Twisted Fate up into the mid lane A tier. As more players have gone back to building TF with a more offensive Ludens into Lichbane build, it's actually leading to far greater results for the champion in solo queue. Makes a lot of sense, as Everfrost with Fire Cannon is more of a utility setup that is better suited for pro, where you can rely on your teammates more. Highest on the ban list for mid lane this patch are Orianna, Syndra, and Sylas. Mal's, Aurelion Sol, and Brand are 3 of the best low elo mid lane champs. Riot's throwing Lucian a bone for 13.24 as his E cooldown will be buffed. It's actually a pretty nice change, as the cooldown is dropping from 22 scaling to 14 seconds to 19 scaling to 14 seconds. Even though the cooldown stays the same at max rank, this is a great early to mid game buff for Lucian. Late game doesn't really get affected, but that's not where Lucian thrives anyway. Lucian would much rather have an early to mid game buff like this, as that is where he can really take over. Lucian could potentially become a fringe S tier pick off the back of this buff, but for now, we'll be leaving him in the A tier as we feel like he needs one more change to really push him over the top. Zeri has been sitting at the bottom of the ADC tier list for multiple patches in a row now, so some buffs are finally headed her way. If you guys are looking to pick up Zeri, our challenger ADC 6axe has a new full game commentary for the champion that has just been uploaded to our website. AD growth is up from 1.3 to 2, W damage is up as well from 20 scaling to 180 to 30 scaling to 190. In regards to the AD growth buff, we saw Trundle receive a similar change in 13.23, and he ended up gaining a substantial amount of strength from it. Trundle's AD growth was increased by 1 per level though, and Zeri's is going up by 0.7, so not directly comparable. ADCs also have a harder time keeping up in levels due to sharing XP with their support, so we can probably expect the Zeri buff to be 50% less effective than the Trundle one. When you factor in the W change as well though, Zeri should still gain a solid amount of strength from this buff, as she will be moved into the ADC B tier for 13.24. The ADC tier list is not going to see any significant movement for 13.24, as you can expect the meta to to stay pretty stable for the remainder of Season 13. This means Vayne will be on top once again as the lone OP carry. A couple of ADCs who are worth a ban for the current meta include Jinx, Vayne, and Draven. Ziggs, Misfortune, and Jinx are who we have rated the highest for the lower elos. Braum will have his teamfight strength bolstered for 13.24 with a really nice buff to R. R minimum and secondary knockup duration is being increased from 0.3 to 0.6 seconds. This means if you're able to hit multiple targets with your R, the value is going to be much higher moving forward. Braum's mana regen is also being buffed, going from 6 to 7, but this one is pretty negligible. We've had Braum down in the support B tier for a while now, but as a result of these buffs, we'll be giving him a push into A for 13.24. Braum's still not the most blind pickable support, as he does struggle into double ranged bot lanes, but if you can play him as a counter to melee supports like Blitz, Thresh, or Nautilus, he can work really well. The tankiness and damage of Leona are both being buffed for 13.24. W resistances are going from 20 scaling to 40 to 20 scaling to 50. So nothing at rank 1, which doesn't make Leona's level 2 or level 3 all-in any stronger, but she does max W out first, so in the mid-game at level 9, she will be stronger in teamfights. Our damage is going up from 100 scaling to 250 to 150 scaling to 300. 50 added damage at level 6 is pretty big and will significantly amplify the all-in power of Leona. Leona has been struggling to find footing in the meta as of recent, but these buffs should be enough to push her back into a great spot and will be moved into the support S tier. There are only 2 support changes we have for 13.24, so let's take a look at the tier list. OP picks are going to stay the same as in 13.23, as we have Zyra, Blitzcrank, and Janna rising above everyone else. With melee supports like Braum and Leona both buffed this patch, it's going to provide Janna with even more strength, as she especially loves playing into Leona. Prior to the Leona buffs, Janna was winning over 55% of the time in the matchup, and even though that number will drop off a bit in 13.24, it will still be pretty ridiculous. Support meta is honestly in such a great spot right now, as there's so much variety to choose from. It's not like one specific class of champions are dominating, as we have enchanters, mages, and melee supports in the S and OP tier. Honestly, if your champion pool just consisted of Zyra, Janna, and Blitzcrank, you'd have a very well-rounded trio that you can choose between based on what each champion select is looking like. Supports that are highest on our ban list for this patch include Senna, Blitzcrank, and Rakan. Brands, Zyra, and Morgana are 3 of the best supports to climb low elo the fastest. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about SkillCapped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into Elo Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. So there you have it guys, a complete look at the tier list as we head into the final patch of the season. Thanks so much for watching, good luck with your end of season climbs, and we'll see you back soon.